Hello, everyone. Welcome to I Am Nature. My name is Brian Porter, and this is a show. Well, lately we've been talking a lot about eco-villages, but today we're going to change the theme a bit. We've got Mumta Ito here. She lives in Scotland. Are you with us, Mumta?
I am. Hi.
Hey, and I've also got my producer here, Angela Black. Are you with us?
I am. Hello, Brian.
Hey. Oh, awesome.
And hello, Munta.
Hi, Angela.
Another great start. So, Munta, the reason I asked you on my show is I think you're doing some awesome stuff over there in Europe to try to deal with some major eco problems.
Yes. What is your exact title, Munta? And so what is your profession?
That's actually a bit of a tricky question these days because I don't tend to operate with titles anymore, and it's a little bit difficult to pigeonhole what I do into a title. But to give you a little bit of a gist, I had a career as a corporate lawyer, and I used to represent investment banks and things like that. Had a bit of a life change, became a full-time spiritual practitioner. During that time, I had this urge to use my skills in a way that could benefit humanity, benefit the planet, and I spontaneously got involved in a project in the Caribbean to save an island of global ecological importance, and ended up kind of having a bit of a life-changing experience with that because I found a very different way of coming to law and finding that by working on the energy, actually things shift on the outside and things were happening very effortlessly compared to the usual way of doing law. And that kind of, to cut a long story short, that sort of led to me going deeper into energy work and culminated in the creation of an organization called the International Center for Wholistic Law. And that's all about shifting paradigms within law itself, realigning law with the universal laws that govern all life, the laws of nature, if you like. And a tangible project, a big project that we have on at the moment is bringing a European Citizens Initiative to get the rights of nature recognized in law at EU level. So in terms of my actual title, I don't know. I sort of, I do all these different things. I do whatever needs to be done.
Well, I call you an eco-lawyer. I hope that's okay.
That's great.
So, okay, I didn't want to get too far into your life right away, but let's go back a bit. Tell me about your early years, where you grew up, where you went to university, that kind of stuff.
Oh, gosh, my early years. Well, what can I tell you about my early years that would be most relevant and useful?
Well, I mean, you said you went into corporate law. Why did you do that initially?
Oh gosh, that was strange, actually, when I think about it, because I grew up in an environment where I was exposed to spiritual practice at a very young age. And there came a certain point in my life where suddenly, I had this parent telling me, my father, telling me that, no, you can't go off and be a yogi. What you need to do is you need to go and get a serious job and all of this. And I decided to do law because, just I love drama, and I was naturally a good orator, and in my mind I thought, well, a lawyer, you stand up in court and you do all this great stuff and it's going to be fun. And when I actually arrived as a lawyer, I found a very different reality.
Oh, really? So you didn't like practicing law, or did you actually get to the point where you practiced corporate law?
Oh yeah, I practiced for about 7-8 years. And it wasn't what I thought it would be. The hours were incredibly long. the environment's highly pressured, very competitive, um, all around a very stressful environment. And the amount of paperwork far outweighs the amount of standing up and, doing things in court. And appearing in court is anything but dramatic. It's highly technical. So all my thoughts of what it might be were dashed when it came to actual real-life experience of the job.
I see. Okay. Now, I saw a video of you talking about you had some sort of dramatic change or some sort of message sent to you that pushed you in the direction of getting into the eco movement and doing what you're doing now. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, basically, it was...
Is that your mic moving?
Yeah, sorry, was that...
You can hear it, yeah.
Okay. All right, sorry about that.
Yeah, so just don't move. No. Just kidding.
Okay, it was actually my headphone cord that had got twisted around the microphone, so I was sort of trying to free it, but anyway, yeah, it wasn't as clear-cut as that. I mean, basically, I was in the throes of life as a corporate lawyer, feeling highly disillusioned, very discontented with my life, and it was around that time that I had a powerful spiritual experience that dramatically changed my view of things. And shortly after that, I knew that I had to come out of that environment. So when I came out of that environment, I had an immediate thirst to go deeper and deeper into the spiritual inquiry, and I ended up for quite some time focusing on that exclusively. So it wasn't for a while after that until I felt from within that I'd love to do something to serve the earth, and maybe I could use my skills. However, the way it came about was totally unexpected. I was in the middle of traveling with my spiritual teacher, and I remember asking her, like, whether, that I couldn't reconcile in my mind that, I'd trained to the nth degree in law. I'd been to the best school. I was working in the top firm. I was in, about the top 5% of lawyers in the country, and all that vanished. And I wondered, I've got all this skill. Surely I should be able to use it in some way. And so I asked her, is there any way, should I be using this skill in some way to serve humanity? Or, should I just abandon the whole idea because nothing about law resonates with me anymore? It's retributive, it separates people, it's mechanistic. There are so many things that just are not aligned with how I am as a person. And she said, stay in it for now. When the opportunity comes to serve, just take it. And a week later, I found myself in the Virgin Islands. I got approached by somebody saying, there's this island, pristine island, and the government want to put a golf course on the island. They've just given planning permission. Chief Conservation Officer's tearing his hair out. No lawyers on the island will help him because everybody's dependent on the government for their business permits, and nobody wants to go against the government. And also, it's a small place. Everybody knows everybody. Nobody wants to rock the boat. So will you help? So I thought, okay, when the opportunity comes to serve, just take it. And so I went to go and see the Chief Conservation Officer. We had 3 weeks to file a case. I knew nothing about Virgin Islands environmental law, but I was willing to have a go. And miraculously, everything that I needed came within that time, and we filed the case, and this sort of was the start of the change of professional direction, as it were.
Wow, what a story! If I may, it's such a drastic, polar opposites. And in some way that you've now found, the avenue to combine both your spiritual destiny and your law training, and to be able to utilize that in a way that works harmonically is truly blessed and brilliant, really.
Well, yeah, particularly for me with this case, a lot of the learnings were, I was, straight after filing this case, I was due to be working with my spiritual teacher. And so I was in Europe the next week for a few months, and then I was in India, and, she continuously travels around the world, and I was, doing the same. And so... And also the pace of working with this particular teacher was very intense. So I had very little free time, and I very often, wouldn't know if there would be any internet access, and I thought, okay, this is going to be very interesting. There's the government, the developers had joined on the case, and they'd hired a QC, and there's me and a student, and I'm living out of a suitcase. And the student is on the island but doesn't really know what to do without getting in touch with me. So this is going to be interesting. Let's see what happens. And I just literally watched this case do itself. And I noticed that there was a way of tapping into the energy of the field, that whenever anything needed to be done, everything would get done in a miraculously efficient way. If I needed to be communicating with somebody, suddenly I'd have internet access. Everybody I need to communicate with would be online. We'd transact whatever we needed to do in a really short space of time. And then, then I'm off doing something else again. And this was so counter to that paradigm that we were taught, at law school and in law firms, that, you push and push and push, and you work hard and long, and I just literally saw this case doing itself. But the actual real harmonic convergence in the whole thing was in the result, because we ended up, we won at first instance. We lost on appeal, because the judge decided that because of some technical wording in the law, that it wasn't actually a protected area, and that's something that was never even contested. So the developers can go ahead. But what had happened was, over the time that this case was running, the energy had shifted so much that the government, who were originally our opponents, actually came back and they said, okay, well, we'll change the law. We'll change that wording. The planning permission has lapsed. We'll also declare it a national park, and the developers will now have to submit a new application with it being a national park. So what I also noticed was that all change happens at the energy level. And if we'd have won the case, but the energy hadn't shifted, the very best outcome that we can get in our existing system is it goes back to the planning department, a new application gets submitted, it gets around the technicalities, and and then eventually communities run out of steam. However, because the energy had shifted so much, by the time this case came to its conclusion, the government were actually on our side. And so even though we lost the case, we got a much more robust outcome than we'd ever hoped for.
Wow, that's amazing. So you probably went a lot into the. Did you use arguments about energy in your case? Did you talk about the fact that the land has a character, a personality, and that it's not proper to disrupt this energy, and that things of that sort? Or were you more technical in your analysis?
Well, unfortunately, with the legal system that we have at the moment, which, I'll talk a little bit more about when we come on to the rights of nature and how that shifts the entire paradigm. Unfortunately, with our current system at the moment, it's highly technical. Most people don't realize that environmental issues, because nature is deemed to be property, is almost exclusively dealt with by the planning courts. So what that means is that the only conversation that can happen in court is whether the correct planning procedure was followed. So this was a big learning for me as to how the whole environmental law system operates. It regulates harm, regulates damage by saying exactly how much damage can happen. So in effect, I mean, the law says, yes, damage is okay, and it, and even permits it by granting permits, for example, for certain activities. It was highly technical. We had to find technical reasons. The decision making itself was at fault. And in our case, we had plenty of arguments and reasoning for the decision making being at fault, because there were some expert letters saying that, even one part of the golf course, one of the holes was actually like right in the protected area, and it was going to destroy all this habitat and all of that. That was never disclosed to the public. Also, the decision maker had come to this decision unilaterally by himself right at the end without consulting anybody. So there were all these things. However, being a small island, the judge didn't find for us on that basis. When we won the first time round at first instance, the only ground that she let us have was that development cannot happen because it is a protected area, full stop.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was, pretty robust ground. But then on appeal, they tried to attack that it is a protected area on some technical, in one place they called it a marine fisheries protected area, and then another place they called it a fisheries protected area. And, it's obvious they were talking about the same place in the law, but, the judge, it just created that little excuse for the judge to say, no, it's not. But in our case, it didn't matter anyway, because the actual people that could do something about it ended up being on our side.
Well, I want to get back to that, because can you explain to me how you shifted the energy of that island and the decision makers? Do you have any idea how you did that?
Well, yeah, it was on many levels. So the first level was in working with the people. So when I first arrived, the people were incredibly negative. Even those wanting to protect the place were like, oh, nothing ever happens on this island. You can't change anything. It's, what's the point? We can never achieve anything. It was highly negative. And there was something about, somebody coming in from the outside and having a completely different view on life and about the possibility of creating something different that just seemed to shake up the energy in there somehow, and new hope started to come in. So the first step was kind of the empowerment of the people themselves, getting them to believe that a different outcome is possible and that they can be the ones who can create that change. And so the first transformation was in the energy of the people. The people bringing the campaign started to, see it differently. They started to see it in a hopeful light, and they started to network with people. Small islands, so, everybody knows each other. Invite these people round for dinner, have a chat with them, get the discussion going, not in an adversarial way, but in a way that helps them realize that we're all here, we're all on this small island. Making money is one thing, but really, if we take out the island ecology, it's pretty bad news for everyone. So building links, creating dialogue, and in a non-adversarial way. So I guess, to put that in like common terms, it's really to do with changing one's attitude from going against to actually working with, to bring a positive outcome that would be a higher outcome for everyone. So, so these were the sort of practical steps that were taken. And then, on the inner level, I have my own spiritual practice. I'm an energy healer, and I actively used the practices that I have, working on the energy of the situation and working on my own energy as well at the same time. So healing practices.
Wow, I didn't know that you're an energy healer. Oh, that's another show there in and of itself.
Oh,
awesome.
yeah. After I left law, that's what I went into. I first I trained in Reiki. I became a Reiki master, and then I trained with one of the top Shugendo monks in Japan, who, Shugendo is a tradition in Japan where the monks wander through the mountains and they stand under freezing waterfalls and they merge their energy with the energies of nature, and they get in touch with the nature spirits and the various different energy manifestations of nature. So I trained with him as well.
Wow, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
This is, I've never heard of that form of energy medicine, actually. And that's why, is that how you know Michael Baker? He's been on the show. We all love Michael Baker.
Oh, yeah, I know Michael, because he joined our European Citizens Initiative for the Rights of Nature. And he came to Findhorn, where we had our wonderful inaugural meeting, where we had about 30 people from all different countries in Europe, gather to really not just brainstorm how we're going to do this, but also to really deeply work on the energy field as well. So yeah, I do know Michael.
And you chose to live at Findhorn, I understand, because you like the energy there. Is that one of the reasons you went there, to have your family?
Yeah, it was also one of these things that kind of came to me rather than me consciously choosing. I wanted to go to Findhorn, but once I arrived, I realized this is where I needed to be, and it was shortly after moving to Findhorn that I got the guidance to create this project, the Center for Holistic Law, and subsequently to bring the Citizens Initiative to get the rights of nature recognized in law. We did, shortly after I founded the center, I convened a gathering for lawyers, environmentalists, change makers to look at the field of holistic law and where a change maker would be most effective. And we used systemic constellation work. During that session, it became crystal clear that the one thing that our mainstream system of law cannot cope with is when the law has to consider all beings, because it's not set up for that.
Uh-huh.
And this was when holistic law, or and the realignment with natural law, as it were, really comes to the fore. So that's where I got the clear insight that we need to get the rights of nature in law, and that helps to shift the paradigm.
And so you said a term that I'm not really familiar with, systemic constellation practice?
Yes, right. Okay, well, it's quite revolutionary. It's yeah, especially to hear it, in the context of law campaigning, because but having said that, slowly people are, starting to realize that there are other forms of intelligence that we can tap into rather than just, arguing all the time. So systemic constellations, this came out of the work of Bert Hellinger, who is, he's a German psychologist, philosopher, and also a spiritual practitioner. He was out in Africa when he started to get very interested in how the Zulus work with their ancestral energies when it comes to resolving their current problems. He found that most of the current issues usually had some sort of a systemic root in an unresolved issue from an ancestor. And that you could actually represent any element of the system using people, and so what he did was he kind of, he stripped away the ritual from what they were doing and combined it with some other, methods that he'd been learning. He was studying phenomenology, which is the study of phenomena as it is. Rather than, trying to psychoanalyze things, allow an object to, to speak to you. And so he put together this method which he called family constellations, and people started having really miraculous healings with it. It is quite a magical space. I've seen a quote somewhere from Rupert Sheldrake that when he saw systemic constellations, he described it as morphic fields in action. So basically...
Well, I think we're going to go on a break here, Munta, but we'll pick up this fascinating discussion after the break. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone, to I Am Nature, excuse me, with Brian Porter. And his guest today is Mumta Ito. Very, very nice to have such a wonderful spirit on the show. Brian, you always bring amazing guests to the equation, and I just wanted to compliment you on yet another wonderful individual, Mumta, joining us today. And I just had some station business to do real quick, which is you're listening to Revolution Radio, everyone, freedomslips.com. We are the #1 100% listener-supported radio station on the planet, and the way to keep us alive and floating, the boat floating, and the movement happening is to find the donate button at the side of the chat room if you're in the chat room, or at the top of the homepage it says support, and there are different ways that you can support, including for a donation you can receive the seed pack, which is I think it's $100 donation, and you get 54 varieties of 35,000 seeds, and they're non-GMO, non-hybrid. And they are amazing. They are compiled. The group of seeds is compiled by Nighthawk, the owner of the station himself. And I got the seed pack last year and grew some beautiful vegetables and I guess fruit. I think a tomato is a fruit. I never know. Anyway, you can also subscribe to the archives for a mere $5 a month, and you can find that at the homepage again on freedomslips.com. It's totally worth it in case you miss your favorite shows. We have 2 studios going, so if you tune into one studio and you miss the other show, well, problem solved. Just subscribe to the archives. And lastly, another way that you can donate is to purchase the 2014 DVD archives of the entire year's worth of your favorite hosts' shows. So that's like $30, I think, plus shipping and handling, and totally worth it. So do find yourself part of the movement. If you just have $1 or $2 to spare, we would love to accept that as well. And that's why you won't hear commercials. You won't hear big corporate commercials or political agenda commercials on the show. The only thing you're really hearing is promos for other shows that we offer. So that's it. I think I'm done with the spiel. And Brian, take it away.
Oh, thanks so much, Angela.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to admit, it's been an amazing run. This is my 6th show, and every one of my guests has been off the charts, in my opinion. And
absolutely.
Munta's fitting right in. I had no idea she was so into this energy work, and I believe in all this stuff. I use it in my own life. I've got my own tri-energy healing system ×2, and but that would be a topic for another show, and maybe we can get Munta on. We can compare our energy healing systems. And but this stuff works. I mean, I started this show, and man, I got eco villages popping out of everywhere, and people coming together. It's just been unbelievable. Are you there, Munta?
Yes, I'm here. I've unmuted my mic. I'm here.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, I was just, because since I started my show, it's only been 6 weeks, and things are manifesting all over the place that I did not expect to happen.
Yeah, you're a great connector, Brian.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Oh, thanks, Angela. Yeah, I mean, that's the key. I mean, we got to bring people together. I mean, there's so many good people out there. A lot of them are really too modest to sort of, toot their horn. And I'll bring them on, and I'll say, oh, what are you doing? And then someone else will hear something say, oh, I'd like to do that too, and I'd like to get involved in that. And believe it or not, there's some talk about some of the people that you know, Mumta, coming on this radio station and starting their own show. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that's brilliant.
See? It's just one great thing after another. So this systemic constellation practice, now I don't know how much time we can spend on that, because it fascinates me, but I really wanted to get into more of this, your legal kind of, strategy to help.
Yeah, sure, about rights of nature, what it is, and all of that.
Well, the first thing I wanted to ask about is the European Citizens Initiative. Now, I think that's a powerful action too. Can you get into that a bit with our audience?
Yeah. Okay. So basically, in Europe, we're the only or the first, institution, I guess, one would call the EU that has participatory democracy, direct democracy, at a transnational level. So this means that the European Union, if they make a law, it's immediately applicable in all of the member states, and citizens can put items on the agenda. So it's a set process. Basically, you need 7 people from 7 member states to propose a law. It's got to be something within the competency of the EU. So it's got to be in an area that the EU is allowed to make laws. And provided it is, and you can raise enough support, and enough support means 1 million signatures with a minimum number of 0.01% of the population of at least 7 member states. So long as you can pass that threshold, it goes directly to the Commission, the European Parliament, and they've got to consider passing that law. They've got to debate it, and yeah.
And this is already, you didn't create this initiative. This was created by the European Parliament. When did this all start?
The European Citizens Initiative is a participatory democracy tool, which started in 2012. In 2013, I got my guidance about the rights of nature, and I found out that there is participatory democracy in Europe. Now, believe it or not, if you have such an incredible tool, you would have thought that people would be using it left, right, and center. Hardly anybody in Europe even knows that this tool exists. So, we have had some European citizens' initiatives brought by, the very first one that was brought was the right to water, and that was brought by a big NGO. Even though it was brought in the names of individual members, but it was backed, by this big NGO. It's not used as much as it could be for a couple of reasons. One, it's highly technical, so if you weren't a lawyer, you may find difficulty in being able to formulate what it is that you're trying to propose in a way that the Commission will accept. So it's highly technical, and secondly, it's got to comply with the data protection laws of, all the 27 member states, and the online collection system is designed by the Commission. It's a little bit cumbersome, and it asks for all kinds of private details, and so there are many obstacles, and that whole instrument's coming up for review this year. 2015, and I'm also on the board of another organization that is about promoting direct democracy in Europe, and we're running a campaign as well this year to reform the ECI, to make it citizen friendly. So hopefully those reforms will go through this year in time for the official launch of the European Citizens Initiative for the Rights of Nature. So the
can I just ask you a question, Munta? Just what's this direct democracy organization? Because I know people in Canada that are trying to create one.
Okay. Yeah, basically we're called the Association for the European Citizens Initiative. We recently formed. It was formed out of a project called an ECI that works. So this is a project that was studying how the ECI has gone over the past couple of years and which areas need to be reformed. And then it became apparent, that there is a bit of a systemic issue. We have direct democracy in about 18 member states. But in a lot of these member states, the systems are so archaic that citizens can't use them. The rules are like so unwieldy, where you've got to get a ridiculous, 500,000 signatures, and each person has to personally come to the town hall to sign, or something like that. So these sort of archaic provisions, they all need to be revised, and this is why we decided to set up the association, to kind of to take the work beyond just the instrument of the ECI, but more looking at fostering direct democracy in many ways. So that's on the ECI itself. On the ECI for the rights of nature, so when citizens propose laws, they can bring an ECI for anything, and so the rights of nature is the topic that we've chosen to bring ours about. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I thought you were going to keep going on about the European Citizens Initiative. No, that's great. That's a great answer. I'm going to try to hook you up with, you guys must have a website for the association, for the European Citizens Initiative.
Yeah, now, do you want me to speak a little bit more about our European Citizens Initiative, the rights of nature?
Yeah, well, I want to talk about that. We've got 2 hours, but I want to know more specifically, has anything substantial passed through this vehicle? Because a lot of people say, referendum, they're no good, they don't achieve anything. So can you give me an example? I want to try to pump people up to show that these things can work. What happened with this water rights initiative? Is it still in Parliament, or where's that at?
It's still in Parliament. So, I mean, the EU is it's not a very quick institution. So, so basically they were successful. The verification took, because they've then got to go back to each member state and verify that all these signatures are real and all that. That took, about another year. So you have a year to collect the signatures. You submit the signatures. You have this verification period. And then after that, if they say, okay, you've got X number of verified signatures, you pass the threshold, then a hearing is set up, and then the Commission writes its response, and and then it goes through the usual process. So it's an ongoing kind of thing. I can't actually point to a tangible outcome as yet from it, apart from the whole issue of water as a human right suddenly got put into a different framing than it had been previously, and highlighted in the minds of the public through the Citizens Initiative, and also highlighted as an issue for discussion and for legislative change.
Well, I mean, it is a new initiative. I mean, it's not like it's been around for 10 years. So you can't you can't judge it based upon that. I mean, if the water rights initiative is still being considered or is still in the pipeline, then we'll have to see what happens with that. But it sounds to me like it's a very sensible way to create some power for real democracy. If people can actually go in there and say, like, personally, one of my big beefs is against geoengineering. We chatted a bit about that before the show a little while ago, and I'd love to see someone put one through this citizens initiative to say we need to ban geoengineering in Europe.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's the kind of thing that they could bring. And part of the reforms, initially, it was people that campaigned to have direct democracy in Europe, and finally we got the ECI. Initially, we wanted it to go to referendum, but the Commission were a little bit nervous and said, no, they'll start, we just want it as agenda setting. So that's what we ended up getting an instrument that is weaker than what people originally wanted. But that's not to say that cannot change. So I would say where we are in Europe with the ECI is we've got our foot in the door, and we're working on widening that wedge. And without any form of direct democracy, we're really at the mercy of the corporate lobbyists. So originally, the whole intention...
Who isn't?
Well, the whole intention behind the ECI was to counterbalance that, to give people a voice. And, and the whole thing about the reform is to break down the barriers that make the instrument a little bit technical and unwieldy to use, and to make it a lot more citizen-friendly. Ideally, what we'd like to see is the moment, you hear about something going on that is not desirable, that people would just go online, launch an ECI, get the signatures, and move with it quickly. We want it to be a responsive tool. And it's a work in progress.
Okay. And you're trying to make it more user-friendly with this association. You're lobbying to make it user-friendly.
Absolutely. That's what we're doing.
Awesome. Okay. So we covered that really well, and it sounds encouraging to me, anyways. And the rights of nature now. This is something that was started in. Is it Bolivia is the first country that passed laws protecting nature?
Bolivia Bolivia was the first country that had it in law. Ecuador, before Bolivia, put it into the Constitution.
Okay, what's the difference?
Well, if you put something in the Constitution, but you don't actually have the detail of it worked out in law, you don't have it in law, you're relying on constitutional law for your remedies. So you're relying on the government enforcing it. And if the government decide that they want to follow a different policy, you're going to have a hard time getting them to enforce it.
Okay.
So in countries like Ecuador, where there's all this issue about the backtracking on the Yasuni and all that stuff, a huge part of the problem is that, it's up to the government to enforce constitutional law, and they didn't actually, pronounce it in law. It's just in the Constitution. Yes, certain actions that are going on there at the moment are very, they are unconstitutional. But if the governments are taking the stand that they're not going to do anything about it, you're kind of stuck. So if you have it in law, and you have an independence of the judiciary to the political machine, then you have some sort of chance of having, some independent voice saying this is against the law. And we rule that it is against the law. We're going to rule that we're going to put an injunction so that this work has to stop, or, that sort of thing. But, so that's basically the difference.
Okay, that's good. That's a great explanation. So is your initiative similar to the Bolivian initiative in terms of how it's structured and how you want it to work?
Right, okay. So our initiative is going for law again. With the ECI, you can't propose treaty amendments, which is a shame because it would be great to actually put something explicit in the treaties, even though the treaties give the Commission a wide ambit to introduce environmental laws. They also, it actually says it in one of the articles in the treaties as well, that animals are sentient beings. But it doesn't, I mean, we have human rights incorporated into the treaty, but, there's no mention of the rights of nature or the interdependence of human rights and the rights of nature. So given that we can't go for treaty amendments, we're going for a directive. And a directive is, it's a sort of umbrella law. So it lays out principles that the member states then have to enact into national law within a certain time frame.
You're talking about the rights of nature versus the ECI.
The rights of nature. Yeah. I was talking a little bit about process.
Okay.
In terms of the content of what we're doing, I think it's important to give people a little bit of background about, why rights of nature. I spoke a little bit about, environmental law when I was telling my story. But
yes.
Basically, if we take it down to the root, we have certain universal laws that govern all of life. And when we operate in sync with that, we create peace and harmony and prosperity for all of life. When we operate in a way that isn't in harmony with it, we create a spiral of destruction. We can see that going on all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
So at the moment, we have a legal system that's facilitating an economic paradigm that, as its key concept, the one thing that underlies our economic paradigm is the utility value of nature. So it's nature being valued for its usefulness to human beings solely, and not perceived to be something that is independently existing and that has the right to exist and persist and thrive, that is alive and is the source of life. So this utility value concept that gets translated into law as nature being property and only property. So if nature is property, basically that gives the property owner the right to destroy all nature on its property. You can do what you like with it. The law doesn't recognize a relationship between human beings and property. It only recognizes the relationship between subjects of the law. So in our law, nature is just an object. It's just something that can be owned. And outside of that, it doesn't really exist. It doesn't, it's not really taken into account. So this is known as, an anthropocentric perspective. The law is, essentially, and one could say it has to be anthropocentric because it deals with human beings. So our laws are only relevant to human beings. But it's also anthropocentric in that it treats the world as if everything revolves around human beings. And we know that we live in a hugely interconnected web of life, and human beings are just one part of this web. So nature as property, we end up having this piecemeal protection system. So environmental law, we start out with the basis that none of nature isn't protected under the law because...
Well, I think we're going to go to break here, Mumta. We'll pick up this great discussion about rights of nature in about 5 minutes. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome back to I Am Nature. I am Brian Porter, host of this show. My producer, Angela Black, I believe, is with me, and Mumta Ito, who is way over in Scotland. It's midnight her time. We really appreciate that she's staying up to talk to us about such important topics such as the rights of nature, and her incredible efforts to get this legal, would you call it a statute, a treaty? How would you describe it in legal terms?
A directive.
A directive.
Yeah, a directive. Yeah, it's the name of an instrument that the European Commission produce. Yeah, it's the strongest form of instrument that they produce because it's immediately applicable in all of the member states. So so we're requesting a directive.
Okay, and so you were talking about the fact that we sort of within the present environmental law, we kind of see ourselves as gods on the earth, and that nature is sort of secondary to us. That's what we came up with the term anthropocentric.
Well, it's sort of it's a little bit more, like a slavery model. That nature is there just to serve our interests, and that it's it exists ad infinitum to serve our needs. That's basically how it is. So the whole utility value thing. Nature is property under the law, and and I was coming on to say how that leads to some really practical side effects that make it really difficult for people to protect nature under the law. So, the first thing is this piecemeal protection system. So we start out by saying nature isn't protected. So environmental law tries to carve out protections. So what this means is that we're constantly reactively legislating. We're always on the back foot. Some disaster is happening. Oh, we need legislation for that. Now we need legislation for this. Now we need legislation for that. So we're so busy, reactively legislating that there's no time for people who make laws to proactively start legislating to create the kinds of frameworks that we need. So with this piecemeal protection system, you inevitably have gaps. Take biodiversity, for example. Most of the protection system there revolves around endangered species. And, pretty much all of these laws everywhere, they work by listing the endangered species in a schedule at the back of the law. And it takes years to update these schedules, lots of money, scientific studies. And at the moment, according to WWF's Living Planet Index, in the last 40 years alone, we have wiped out 50% of all biodiversity on the planet. So we're literally, they say we're losing something between 1,000 to 10,000 times the backdrop extinction rate, literally losing dozens of species a day.
So, it's atrocious.
Yeah. So a system like that, where it takes years to get something on the endangered species list, in the meantime, we've already lost species. And in an interconnected web of life, who's to say which species is a VIP? Who's to say that if we didn't take a certain insignificant species out of the equation, that it wouldn't have a huge knock-on effect elsewhere in the ecosystem? So, so this whole mechanistic approach that law takes, that we can deal with this little bit here in isolation of this bit and that bit and that bit, it's really falling apart when it comes to the environment. And if it was working that well, it's interesting that the Living Planet Index looked at the last 40 years, because that's just about the time span from which our first environmental laws came in. If our laws were effective, we wouldn't have wiped out 50% of biodiversity on the planet. So, so that's one thing. Rights of nature, we're looking at a holistic perspective. We're looking at man and his place in the in the web of life, looking at ecosystems as independently existing, rights-bearing subjects of the law. So, so when you have a case, an ecosystem has to be represented in its own right, in its own capacity, as an equal stakeholder in the equation of life, to human beings so that its needs are also taken into consideration. So the other side effect of nature as property is, like I mentioned when I was talking about my personal experience, that we're stuck in the planning courts. The only conversation that can happen in court is whether the correct planning procedure was followed. So you can't say we don't want fracking, because we're scared about the ramifications, the health ramifications and future generations. It's irrelevant. Was the correct procedure followed? Did they tick the boxes? Usually they would have ticked the boxes, because very often there's just a duty to consult. There isn't a duty to actually, do anything further than that. So
yeah, social engineering at its worst.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a very democratic kind of a process. Very often communities don't even know that some development is happening until it's, almost been approved. The only other avenue in our current system that's open, in the courts, if we want to use the legal system to protect nature, is after the fact. So if some disaster happens, you can litigate in your personal capacity for any loss that you've lost, any monetary loss, and the law will compensate you for actual financial loss. But because there is no legal relationship with nature, nature is not a separately existing entity in our law, it's just property, there is no prima facie obligation to restore nature in any way. I mean, there are some laws that say for certain land contamination issues or whatever that, that the court can order restoration. But in the absence of that, there is nothing that says that we owe nature a duty of care. Like with human beings, if I do something that adversely affects you, in law, I owe you a duty of care. I've got to put you back into the position that you were in had that act not happened. But we don't have that kind of system for nature, because nature isn't an independently existing thing that we can be in relationship with under our law.
Yeah, so we have like dumps of radioactive waste everywhere, and nobody knows what to do. Well, they say they don't have anything to do with it. They just don't want to spend the money to fix it. And you're saying the legal system, as it is now, you can't use it to create change and to restore the planet.
Precisely. And, also there are lots of problems with enforcement of the environmental laws that we have, because usually, the cases can only be brought by NGOs, or, the remedy is, like we have this system here in Europe. We have the Aarhus Convention, which is meant to be access to justice on environmental issues. There's got to be transparency, access to information, access to justice. And but the complaint system is highly technical, and the remedy is that somebody in the commission has a closed doors discussion with somebody from the member state, and that's it. Nobody ever hears what happened as a result of it. It's I know lawyers who've been trying to work this system and find it incredibly frustrating. It's understaffed. They never get responses. So there are these sorts of problems. There's also piercing of the corporate veil, where you have corporate environmental crime going on, or if it's a corporate entity that's damaged an ecosystem. There's no power in the law at the moment to actually go beyond and hold the directors and the shareholders directly liable for that. And that's something that we also we address. The enforcement system in our directive, and also the way in which disputes are resolved. So in our directive, we make a suggestion for moving towards problem-solving courts, where all stakeholders can be invited and solutions can be co-created that meet the needs of various people in harmony with nature. So this is a whole kind of it's a whole transformation of the way the system is currently operating.
Well, let's take a concrete example then of the issue I brought up of nuclear waste. How how would your let's assume this is I guess you're hoping to get this passed and in effect by 2018. Is that your goal?
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
let's assume
once we don't have control over the commission once it's in there, we would give it, following the usual process. We have 2016 to 2017 to collect the signatures. Say 2018, verification, the commission's response, and then it starts to go through the process. So
Okay.
we're probably looking like 5 years minimum.
Okay, so let's assume you get what you want, and I'm someone who's concerned about nuclear waste. How would this law help me clean up that problem? Let's get really concrete.
Well, okay. So basically, at the moment, there's this toxic dumping, and if, the company owns that land or whatever, it can do whatever it wants on its own land. However, if we have rights of nature and the ecosystems on that land are subjects of the law and they have rights in their own right, so let's look at the rights that we're proposing. So we're proposing collective rights, and Bolivia also brought in collective rights for the earth as a whole ecosystem. We've included collective rights, the ecosystems, the species, and so on. And they're briefly the right to life and to exist, the right to maintain the integrity of their natural cycles, their vital processes, and their capacity for regeneration, the right to habitat, the right to naturally evolve and to preserve the diversity of life, the right to preservation of the functionality of the water cycle, and the right to timely and effective restoration. And then on top of that, we are also proposing that, that there is a legal duty of care, that there's legal personality, also that certain procedural rights around standing, representation, enforcement, all of that's taken care of, so that people have the right to be able to represent nature in a court of law and defend nature's rights. So, quite often on environmental issues, people don't have standing because their property rights are not affected, or, something like that. So with this, we want to empower everyone so that everybody has the right to bring a case to defend an ecosystem.
Okay, it sounds a lot better. But let's get back to the practical question.
Yeah.
Of the uranium or the tailing mine or whatever. Something that needs to be repaired.
Okay, the toxic dumping.
Yeah.
So here, the ecosystem itself would be a rights-holding entity. And so me as a concerned citizen, I could bring a case under the rights of nature laws saying that the rights of the ecosystem itself has been infringed, its right to life, to exist, to maintain the integrity of its natural cycles. It cannot regenerate. The inhabitants there don't have any more habitat. It's unable to preserve the diversity of life. If there's water on there, if the water's been poisoned, this affects the functionality of the water cycle. So there's so many different infringements there. And so we're in a very different situation to, did they have planning permission to do what they're doing?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, much more. Could you combine
it's a different conversation.
Oh, yeah. Could you combine it with the effects on humans, too? Would that be considered?
Yeah.
Is that part of the law, or is that a separate issue?
Okay, so something else that we've included in there is the human right to a healthy environment in a rights of nature context.
Oh, beautiful.
So basically, acknowledging that without nature, we're all dead. We need viable, healthy ecosystems in order to survive and thrive. That if the ecosystems are compromised, we're also compromised too. However, it's also acknowledging that we cannot have a right to a healthy environment if the actual ecosystems that are responsible for creating that healthy environment don't themselves have a right to clean water, clean air, and all the things that they need to thrive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're all in the same boat, in other words. It's an interconnected system, a beautiful tapestry that that has to be preserved so all can benefit from it.
Yeah, and also another thing that I wanted to mention about our proposal, we're also proposing that we have an ombudsman for nature so that people don't necessarily have to bring a court case in order to defend nature. You can go directly to the ombudsman if something, say you're not happy about fracking happening in your town, go straight to the ombudsman, infringes the rights of nature. Also, like I said about addressing, the court system, the way disputes are dealt with, and also ecological governance. So at the moment, there isn't really an ecological approach. It's just this regulatory, mechanistic approach to governing ecosystems that don't really align with the nature of ecosystems and how they operate. And so, so in there we're also factoring in, a movement over to a form of ecological governance that requires ecological impact tracing of products and for countries to produce action plans for landscape classification with restoration obligations, so that there is this obligation to keep moving the land, restoring the land up to the next level of pristineness, as you were, So there's a lot of things covered within rights of nature, that isn't just about rights on its own.
Is there any place that someone could view this document in its present form and use it as a basis for their own campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. It's available on a Creative Commons license. The only thing is that we ask that you don't use it commercially, so like selling it or producing derivatives and selling them. But so long as it's used, for the common good, go ahead.
Is it on a website, in other words? Is it easily accessible through a website?
I don't have it. We don't have it on a website at the moment. But I don't. If you have a mailing list, I could send you the link to it.
Okay. No, actually, I have it. I don't need it. I just wanted to see if someone else wanted access to it, that they could see. It's a well-written piece of legislation. I was very impressed with it.
Yeah. A lot of work went into that. We've had, a group of lawyers, academics from all different countries feeding into that. So, it's quite thorough.
Yeah, I know you cover a lot. I think most of the bases. I would have preferred if nature was preeminent, ahead of humanity, but, this is a heck of a lot better than what we have now. What do you think about that, making nature more important than humans? Does that make sense to you?
Well, I would say going with I Am Nature, we called our project Being Nature. It's all part of the same. And so, with rights of nature, it kind of puts us in our right place, that we're just one component. We're a cog on the planet. Mm-hmm. And, and there's a lot of humility that comes with that. Without all of these other beautiful creatures, we couldn't be here. Without the trees and without the vegetables, without the fruits, without clean air, clean water, all of that. So it is quite humbling. And we're a part of that. And if we step in line and do the things that help nature, we help ourselves, because we're all part of the same thing.
Yeah, and it's sort of puzzling that this sort of initiative wouldn't have been done like 40 years ago.
Yeah, these ideas were around 40 years ago. Thomas Berry, he wrote his book, The Great Work, and it was all about his idea of earth jurisprudence, a system of jurisprudence that, basically rights of nature is, it's derived from earth jurisprudence. It's kind of a sort of permacultural approach to law, if you like. It's embodying, trying to codify natural law, sort of, in a way, by building in interdependence and respect for, and compassion and respect for all forms of life. Trying to build that into the equation and putting it in law.
Yeah, no, it's. I think it's amazing. I think it definitely, like I say, we could have used it because, as you said, the devastation that we've manifested here is quite scary for me, and we really need to reverse this trend. And I'm hoping that you can get this through sooner than the 5 years that you're projecting. I've got lots of people telling me we don't have that much time left. So I don't think that that's true. Although I think that our population numbers are going to start decreasing, not increasing soon, if we don't smarten up and start dealing with these horrendous issues that we've got out there. And I mean, using our parliaments and our legal systems to do what they're supposed to do, which is protect our interests.
Yeah. Absolutely. I feel this kind of work, introducing the kinds of laws that we the people want to see, laws that are in service of life and humanity, and this, I really see it, that if our elected representatives are not representing us, they're not representing people that want to do positive things, that direct democracy is really the way. We've got to represent ourselves, each person get empowered, put forward these great ideas, and get other people behind you, make it happen. We've had, with the rights of nature movement in the United States, I'm sure hardly any of you probably know that over 36 municipalities, some places like Santa Monica, Pittsburgh, have enshrined the rights of nature in law at the local level. And this was through citizens coming together and approaching their local representatives and saying, we want this. We want our law to give legal personhood to nature, because we don't feel our environmental laws are strong enough. We don't feel that they're working, this regulatory system that we have. It favors the corporations too much. It favors them more than it favors people in ecosystems. So, so that was really, this ground up movement that's starting in the United States around rights of nature really is very much tied in with democracy, people just standing up and saying we want to make our own laws. And what's kind of amazing about those laws, there are three limbs to it. One is the rights, legal personhood and rights of nature, nature's rights-bearing entities. The second part is the human right to a healthy environment in the context of the rights of nature. So, acknowledging that we can't have a right to a healthy environment if the ecosystems themselves that are producing the healthy environment don't themselves have rights. And the last thing is subordinating corporate interests, where the actions of the corporations are, against the common good, subordinating those interests to the rights of people and ecosystems. So, so that's also, on a local level, but quite revolutionary work. Mexico City has also adopted rights of nature at a local level. In Colombia, there's a big movement at the moment to get rights of nature adopted. There have been various court decisions, like in New Zealand, they've given legal personhood to a river, acknowledging that it's a living being, the Whanganui River. And
wow.
yeah, so Yeah, so there is a trend in Costa Rica. There was a court case where the judge ruled that the second largest reef in the world cannot be commercially exploited because it is a living being, and so on. Even the UN has a department called Harmony with Nature, which is dedicated to promoting awareness of the rights of nature. And there was a declaration that was signed not very long ago between 77 nations plus China. It's a group of 77 nations plus China. In this declaration, they acknowledge that that we, in order to survive and thrive as a species, we need to move towards economic systems that operate in harmony with nature. And it actually says in this declaration, that we accept that the term Mother Nature is a universally recognized term that describes our relationship with nature. So, there's significant shifts happening in the thinking.
Yeah, I mean, it has spread, and I think this is a very positive sign. And I think the more people, I'm not sure if you are doing this on your own time, or whether or not your organization takes donations or things like that, but we should get into that sort of issue a bit more in the last half hour of the show, because I don't know how you manage to do all this work. I mean, are you being paid by the organizations you work with? How do you free up so much time?
No, I'm not being paid. We need to get on to fundraising. That's another thing.
Who has time for that?
Yeah, I know. Well, but so far, I mean, another thing I discovered when I did.
You guys, we're at a break right now. We're just gonna pick it up in a few minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Munta. Welcome back to I Am Nature. This is your host, Brian Porter, my wonderful producer, Angela Black's here, and my amazing guest, Mumta Ito. And I just want to make a short statement about why I do what I do. I mean, I work and I contribute to this station because I believe in Revolution Radio. It has a hell of a good lineup of hosts offering a whole range of important topics, from a more realistic view of what's happening on this planet politically, economically, you name it, spiritually. So it's an incredibly important platform, and I really hope you can find a way to support this station. Listening to Hawk yesterday, he's saying the station basically runs on three main supporters, and that I agree with them. That's not sufficient. Everyone, I think, can afford to put $5 in the donation box, which is at the top right of the site. So please, if you're listening, find a way to support this platform. It's extremely important on the planet. It's really doing a lot to make it a much better place. So let's get back to this great discussion we're having with Munta about the rights of nature. Are you with us, Munta?
Hi, yes, I am.
Awesome. Okay. Now, in the break, we were chatting a bit, and you came up with some sort of short form called COP21, Climate Change in France. Can you get into that a bit?
Yeah. So, okay, we have the climate change negotiations happening in Paris in December this year, and yeah, I just wanted to mention that under the Ecuador Constitution, there is, it actually provides, that because the world, the Earth is one interconnected system, that actions happening anywhere kind of affect the Earth. The Ecuador, under the Ecuador Constitution, it's a violation of the rights of nature, Ecuador Constitution. And so a rights of nature tribunal was set up, which doesn't, it was intended, that this tribunal would have the full force of law, but then the government started to kind of, waver around on that. And it kind of, at the moment, it has a sort of moral status. So this tribunal format, ultimately, it's envisaged that it would have the same kind of standing as like the Human Rights Tribunal. And there was one that was done in Ecuador, and then there was another that was done at the climate change talks in Lima. And it's a forum that gives voice to people who are in desperate situations trying to defend the rights of nature, where they're coming up against some very harsh forces, particularly indigenous people, like you mentioned, the toxic nuclear dumping and the tar sands, and the stuff that's going on in Ecuador. In these situations, I mean, one of the indigenous leaders that was going to testify at the Rights of Nature Tribunal in Lima was actually, well, he was killed before he got there. And
Yeah,
I mean, there
it's
are
terrible.
articles
These
in the
things go
papers
on.
that say, he was murdered. So, it's, for some people who are trying to defend the earth, it's not easy, and they don't have a forum. So the Rights of Nature Tribunal not only shows, legal community how rights of nature can work in law, and the kinds of issues, tangible issues, that how they would be dealt with under that sort of a legal framework, but it also, gives a forum for these people to be able to tell their stories and get them heard out there. So anyway, for the COP21, we're organizing a Rights of Nature Tribunal where we can also showcase some of these. There'll be some of these issues that were ongoing from Lima and all of that they'll be specifically, and they're devoting a whole day to climate change, but there will be one of the days when they'll focus specifically on European issues, and they will use our draft directive as the law from which to make their judgments and decisions. So that's something I wanted to mention. Also, I don't know whether you're aware, Brian, have you heard of the Toltec prophecy that when the 8,000 drums, ceremonial drums, beat for Mother Earth?
Well, is Angela listening?
I am.
Oh, yeah, well, this is her area. I mean, this came up in her discussions with Michael Baker, and I was completely out of it.
Oh, no, you're thinking of the Tolkien. She's talking about something different, the Toltec. Please continue.
Oh, okay, I'm confusing
Mexico.
the two.
I'm talking about Mexico. So Mexican indigenous, there's a prophecy that when the 8,000 drums beat for Mother Earth, that a massive planetary healing will take place, and that the paradigm will shift. So
You're organizing 8,000 drums, I hope.
Yeah, exactly. So what happened? We had a tuning in session when we were planning on our activities for the next year, and somebody just got this download of we've got to do the 8,000 drums, and then within a short time she got connected with the actual holder of the prophecy, and various synchronous activities started to happen. So they've actually this indigenous group, they've actually done some events around that theme, because the drumming has to be done in a particular way to connect the heart energies, and also with in a following a particular protocol. So they've done some events, but not actually with 8,000 drummers. So what we want to do for Paris is to have it as the opening ceremony for the Rights of Nature Tribunal, and to get 8,000 drummers doing this ceremonial drumming, and a live link, with all these indigenous drummers around the world. So that's also something that that we're doing for the COP.
Wow, that sounds very powerful to me. This is So how do you spell Toltec? How do you spell this indigenous?
Toltec, Toltec. It's a Mexican
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
like
the Mayans are there too. That's
know.
why I got it mixed up with the Mayan calendar. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I see. Okay.
A
Yeah.
completely different group, and Michael Baker is very much connected to this Mayan calendar, and this is actually one of the things he wants to discuss on his show with some of the Mayan elders.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Wow, that would be an interesting discussion.
Oh
Yeah. The
Yeah,
other thing that I wanted to mention about rights of nature that I never got round to saying was that you know, rights of nature is on so many levels as well. When I look at where we are as a society on an individual level, on a personal level, our own personal ecology is so out of balance. Our lifestyles, they're so disconnected from the natural cycles. And I really see that as, being mirrored in the outer world with the state of the environment. And so when we talk about, the rights of nature, it's very much on a personal level as well. How much aligned with the laws of nature are we in our own personal life? And by that I mean, are we behaving, on a personal level in a way that's creating a cycle, a virtuous cycle of peace, prosperity, and harmony? Or are we somewhere along the line on a personal level, in our thoughts, in our emotions, in the way we structure our lifestyle, and I mean, for example, like working in jobs that we hate, or, these sorts of things that you see in our society where people feel trapped and they feel that they have no choice. It's all kind of feeding the cycle going the other way. It's working against the laws of nature and bring more discontent, more disharmony, more unhappiness. And so really, I feel that there's something else that people can do to redress the balance in nature, and that is to address the balance within oneself. Because if we are in balance and fully harmonized, then we won't take actions that destabilize anything else, because we'll realize that we are all interconnected and we are all part of one cycle. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that in too.
Well, no, I think it's a very good point. It's one of the things that I've one of my initiatives that's coming up on my show, and it's happening, is I believe that we're not living within systems that are human or that are actually geared to our natural order in the biosphere, that we are actually pack animals. Pack animals don't live in cities of millions of people. They live in small groupings of like-minded beings that cooperate, that have anarchy, sometimes based on eldership, sometimes based on a matriarchy, patriarchy. There's a variety of models, but the bottom line is that the people understand the system, how it's supposed to work. And it's very like one level, very much fairer, much more connected. And I believe that the systems that we live within are literally taking away our energy and depleting us tremendously. Do you agree, Munta?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it takes a lot of courage to step out of those systems and decide to walk a different path.
Yeah, this is why I like having people like you on. Sorry to interrupt you, because you've done that, and I believe that I've done that in my life too. And it's invigorating though. Once you get through the addictive sort of nature of the system that you're in, but it actually is quite a freeing experience.
Absolutely. And when, in my case, when I experience what I used to regard as the way things are, it's hugely shocking to my system to walk back into some of those disconnected environments, and and to think, how did I ever think this was life? Yeah,
and it's amazing how many people you talk to who are in them still, you still have a connection to, and they say, I wish I wish I was living your lifestyle with maybe
Right.
less, but much more quality of life versus quantity of life.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's all, it's all within. I think it starts with taking personal responsibility. And once we do that and we really make a stand to live authentically, um, then the changes just start to flow. And I mean, you asked me a question before the break. You were asking about finances. And
Oh,
I
yes.
must say, since I decided to, take a step out of that system, I just discovered that, you know, in the usual way of things, we perceive that, money is this limited thing, and without it, we can't do anything, and, and I started to find a whole different fluidity um, around money. And that whole thing that we did in the Virgin Islands, we did it with very little money and a lot of goodwill, a lot of people power. Most of the time, money is spent to buy people. But if people are really fired up for the cause and they just offer, and people come together and co-create, I mean, you don't actually need money if you can get to the thing that the money is buying in the first place. So, I found that it requires a lot of trust, but I've never been without. I can say this with 100%, hand on my heart, that whenever I've needed anything, I've always received it. And I started to get this realization at one point that, everything that we need comes spontaneously from the source. In my life, I've been thinking that I was actively procuring these things. But I realized that, this taking action of, well, I did this and that, and then I got the money, and then I did that, it creates a kind of illusion that we're in charge and we're doing it. But in reality, when you strip away those structures, you start to notice how life spontaneously supports us when we're aligned.
Yeah, it's connects to the writer I talked to you about, quite a while ago when we were chatting, talking about the show Ken Keyes. Now, nobody knows about this guy hardly. It's a shame because he's an American, and he created a beautiful system he wrote a book called Handbook to Higher Consciousness, and he talked about the addictive nature of the lower spheres of consciousness, the insecure, the security system, the sensation consciousness, and the power consciousness, which is a real biggie in the world right now. Everyone fighting over limited resources, and a lot of his insights, I think, if it's unfortunate they didn't become mainstream in America, he had all the solutions, and he was writing this stuff back in the early 80s, and it's I think it would align very closely with what you are doing and I am doing with the energy that I create every day in my quest to make this world a much more harmonious place.
Sounds very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you read the PDF. I know you're so busy doing wonderful things, but I've developed my own 3 energy system, and I've got to get more into it on my show, and I don't know, I might even set up another show to do that. It's kind of like it's a different topic area, but it will help people become free of the addictive nature of our system. The fact that you talked earlier about monetizing everything. And that's what we do now within our legal systems, and that how to break away from that thought pattern. And we're basically addicted to one thing on this planet more than anything else, and that's money.
Yeah.
And we can't really see a way of existing without it, and so it's really become our survival instinct. But once you can root that out of your mind, your body, your spirit, you become free, and you thrive.
Absolutely, absolutely. Brian, can you give a quick summary of your 3 energy healing system?
Well, I mean, it's hard to give a quick summary. Like I say, there's the 3 lower levels of consciousness. One is security, the next one is sensation, then the third is power. And this is the ingenious nature of this analysis, is that a power addiction is so prevalent in our world, and that I don't think I've ever heard anyone from any religious philosophy or anyone actually put it in that terms. But within this system, everything is addictive, and what you do is you learn to take your addictions and create a preference out of the addiction. So you may want something, but you don't absolutely need it in order to survive. So once you take all your addictions, whether it's security, sensation, or power addictions, make them into a preference, he calls it an uplifting of the emotional state, then you enter the love center. And in the love center, everything is more spontaneous. You basically, your needs are met. And yeah, it's a very freeing society. And then system. And then the next level is the tri-energy on the external level, and that's where I get into the importance of being connected to nature, spirit, and each other. But in order to do that, you have to kind of get into that love center. So that's where the inner work has to come first, and then the outer work will follow quite easily.
Absolutely. That's so aligned with the whole place that I arrived at with the holistic law. It's when you said about the relationship with self, others, and and the rest of the planet, it reminded me of this conversation that I had with an Aboriginal law holder, and and she said basically, that the Aborigines just have one law, and it's called the law of harmony, and
beautiful,
and that's broken down into 3 areas, which is harmony with self, to honor and respect the self, and then harmony with others, to honor and respect each other, and then harmony with the planet, which is to honor and respect all beings, the earth and all beings. And she said that this law, basically, it's taught to children as they're growing up. So all of their laws, their rules or whatever, they're derived from this. And they have consequences as well, if you transgress the law. But the consequences are not to punish the person or to teach them a lesson. The consequences are to put right the karmic traces or the systemic impact that this transgression would have on the whole tribe. So it's sort of like, it's there to kind of cancel the karma, as it were. And she said they teach it to the children by telling stories of people who've transgressed the law and and the impact that that's had on everybody else. So the children grow up with this sense of responsibility, understanding why the laws are there and that it's there to benefit everybody. And then she said when they come to puberty, they have their initiation ceremony, and they are asked, do you consent to living by the law? And they can say no. If they're not ready, they can say no. And so I said, okay, well, what happens if they say no? And she said, well, that's okay. They're just perceived to be children by the society. Then, because saying no just means that you're not ready to live responsibly in this tribe in a way that cares for self, others, and the rest of nature. So so she described this process where you start off as you're learning the law, then you become a holder of the law, and then when you become an elder, you become a keeper of the law for the next generations. And she said that part of this being a holder of the law is doing the inner work, so that one really embodies that love and respect for self, others, the rest of the planet. And by the time,
sounds like we're getting to the end of the show, Mumta. I'm sorry, I wanted to ask you another question, but we'll have to take it up another time. So Mumta Ito, it's been an incredible privilege to have you on our show. You're doing amazing things. Keep up the great work, and all our love to you and your family.
Thank you, Brian. It's been a great honor to be here with you on Revolution Radio, and all that are listening, do look into rights of nature as an alternative paradigm for the way environmental law needs to move if we're to have a thriving planet.
Take care, Munta.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.